All right, this is Chapter 1, Lesson 6 for Slytherin, Equivalent Ratios. So, the first thing that I want to look at when I'm talking about equivalent ratios is using a unit rate. So, when I use a unit rate, there are different ways to determine if two ratios or rates are equivalent. One way is by examining unit rates, okay? So by comparing quantities as rates in simplest form, you can determine if the relationship between the two quantities stays the same. So if I'm looking at the two examples they give me, I'm comparing 10 pints to $2 and 30 prints to $6, right? So I can divide 10 by 2 to get 5 and 2 divided by 2 to get 1. This gives me a unit rate. Remember, unit rates have to have that 1 in the denominator. Okay. In order to get 6 down to 1, I divide by 6. So 30 divided by 6 gives me 5. 6 divided by 6 gives me 1. Again, 1 is the unit, so that's my denominator, so that means it's a unit rate. Okay. And rates, I'm comparing different things. So I'm comparing prints to money. So since the rates have the same unit rate, they're equivalent ratios. So 10 prints to $2 and 30 prints to $6 are equivalent, which means when I simplify them, I get the same answer. So I get 5 to 1, all right? The second way I can do this is using equivalent fractions. So it's very similar to using equivalent rates. So if a unit rate is not easily found, I can use equivalent fractions to decide whether the ratios or rates are equivalent. So let's look at some examples together. So the first example I'm going to look at deals with finding unit rates, okay? So determine if each pair of rates is equivalent and explain your reasoning. 20 miles in 5 hours, so there's my first one, 20 miles in 5 hours to 45 miles in 9 hours, okay? So the first rate I have is 20 to 5, okay? Now I want to do this as a unit rate, so I'm going to divide both by 5. So 5 divided by 5 gives me 1, 20 divided by 5 gives me 4, okay? Then I have 45 to 9. I want to get this down to 1. So 9 divided by 9 gives me 1, 45 divided by 9 gives me 5. Notice that this and this are not the same, okay? Since the rates do not have the same, they're not the same, do not have the same unit rate, they are not equivalent, okay? So they're not equivalent. All right, let's look at example number 2, okay? I have 3 t-shirts for $21 and then 5 t-shirts for $35. Okay, so I set my first one up. I got 21 over 3. I want it to be unit rate, so I divide by 3. 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. 21 divided by 3 gives me 7. Okay, look at the next one. 35 and 5. 5 divided by 5 gives me 1. 35 divided by 5 gives me 7. Notice that these are the same. So since the rates have the same unit rate, they have the same unit rate, they are equivalent. Okay. All right, so numbers 3 and 4 are going to deal with equivalent fractions, using equivalent fractions. Actually, 3 is still going to deal with using unit rates. All right, Felisa read the first 60 pages of a book, so 60 pages of a book in 3 days. She read the last 90 pages in 6 days. Are these reading rates equivalent? Explain your reasoning. So let's look at the first one, 60 to 3. Again, I want to find a unit rate. So 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. 60 divided by 3 gives me 20. Okay, so now I want to look at 90 to 6. I want to get 6 down to 1, so 6 divided by 6 gives me 1. 90 divided by 6 gives me 15. Are these the same? No. So since they're not the same, they do not have the same unit rate. They are not equivalent. So Felice's reading rates are not equivalent. She read the last part of her book faster than she read some of the first 60 days, or the first 60 pages. Okay. All right, let's look at number 4. So number 4 says determine the pair of ratios or rates is equivalent. Explain your reasoning. So the first one I have is 3 free throws out of 7 attempts to 9 free throws made out of 14 attempts. So I'm going to write each ratio as a fraction. I have 3 to 7, 9 to 14, okay? Now I can look at this. I could divide 7 by 7, but 3 divided by 7 gives me decimals, and we don't want to deal with that. So I want to figure out if these two things are the same, okay? So 3 times what gives me 9? 3 times 3 gives me 9, okay? 7 times what gives me 14? 7 times 2 gives me 14, okay? The numerator and the denominator are not multiplied by the same number. So the fractions are not equivalent. They are not equivalent because I multiplied by a 2 and then I multiplied by a 3, okay? So since the fractions are not equivalent, the ratios are not equivalent. Okay, so not equivalent, all right? I have to multiply by the same thing. Now this would have been 9 out of 21. 7 times 3 would have given me 21. Then they would have been equivalent. All right, so I have 2 try it problems down here. So I want you to go ahead, try them out, okay? Read them on your own, try them out, see what you can do, pause the video, and when you come back, we will go over the answers. All right, so now that you've tried the try it problems, the first one I have is Marcia made 10 bracelets for 5 friends. Jen made 12 bracelets for 4 friends. Are these rates equivalent? Explain your reasoning. Okay, so I'm making 10 bracelets, 12 bracelets, 5 friends, 4 friends. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this. I'm gonna go over here to my workspace. So the first one I have is 10 bracelets for 5 friends. Okay, so what do I need to divide both 10 and 5 by in order to get a unit rate? Well, I need to divide 5 by 5. So whatever I do the bottom, I have to do the top, divide this by 5. 10 divided by 5 gives me 2 bracelets. 5 divided by 5 gives me 1 friend. Okay, so that's my first one. The second one I want to look at is 12 bracelets for 4 friends. Okay, let me zoom out here a little bit so I got a little bit more room. Okay, so now I have 12 bracelets for 4 friends. Okay, so I want to get this to be at 1. So 4 divided by 4 gives me 1, and 12 divided by 4 gives me 3. So I have 3 bracelets for 1 friend. Okay. This and this are not the same, so they are not equivalent. Okay? Don't forget to explain your reasoning. Okay, so if you don't explain, that's part of the question. You have to explain it. Okay, so this is no, since the unit rates 2 to 1 and 3 to 1 are not the same. the rates are not equivalent. Okay? So no, since the unit rates 2 to 1 and 3 to 1 are not the same, the rates are not equivalent. All right, so let's look at letter B. Letter B says Mrs. Jeffries has 12 girls out of 16 students on the student council. The Earth Day committee has 4 girls out of 8 students. Are the ratios equivalent? Explain your reasoning. Okay, so I'm going to come over here to my workstation. Oops, sorry about that. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see everything I'm going to write. Our first one, so I can zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so the first one I have is 12 girls over 16 students. Okay, I can notice that 12 or 16 and 12, it's going to be really difficult for me to find a unit rate, so I want to set them up so that they're equal to one another and find out. 4 girls, so I set them up as fractions. Okay, so looking at this, I can ask myself 4 divided by what, or 12 divided by what gives me 4? Well, 12 divided by 3 gives me 4, right? What about 16? 16 divided by what would give me 8? 16 divided by 2 would give me 8. 3 and 2 are not equivalent. They're not equal to one another, which means that the ratios are not equivalent. So I come back over to my answer over here. Okay. So remember to explain. So no. So we can't just put no. Okay, no. Since 12 to 16 does not equal 4 to 8. The ratios are not equivalent. And that is the end of chapter 1, lesson 6.